We are live. Hey, before we start off, a little shout out to Adam Daniel Mazet, who actually sent me a message in response to the attack in Toronto. And I guess, he's a big fan of the No Fear podcast. And he had heard our previous talk on the active shooter call. And obviously was suitably impressed. I got Near back on the call here. And for people who didn't hear that call, buddy, why don't you just do a quick intro? It's actually your resume is so long it's impossible to do a quick intro, but just bring people together from military overseas back here and so on and so forth to bring them up to speed.
Yeah, I'm originally from Israel, but grew up in Canada most of my life. My life was divided up back and forth between those two countries. Professionally, I've got a 20-year career that spans between military special forces in Israel, law enforcement here in North America, in Canada as well as in the United States. I was a use of force and tactical instructor at police academy. I was on tactical and SWAT units in Canada as well as in the U.S. and transit policing, and I teach all across North America, specializing in counterterrorism, active shooter intervention, and officer survival, use of force. In a nutshell.
Very cool. Yeah, we've known each other probably 15 years now, or something like that.
At least,
maybe longer. Yeah, and it's interesting because there's you meet a lot of people. I've been around teaching now going on 38 years. And so you meet people at trade shows, at conferences, at tactical expositions. And it's a fickle and bizarre community, but some people you meet and you just end up, connecting. There's a lot of backstabbing in our industry. There's a lot of politics in our industry. And there's a few people that just have each other's backs because we're competitors in the theoretical sense, but I think the people that really aren't in this just to make a buck, that are really sincere about making people safer, just kind of connect and respect that. So it's a little background on why Near and I are still friends, a decade or two later. So, hey, man, it's probably never a good reason to have you on the show, right? It's like, I call you up when there's some sort of crisis and I want, but we'll have to do a show where we just talk about our family and kids and, favorite restaurants and stuff like that. But so you're in the States right now on business and so Adam private messaged me and said, hey, can you get Near on to discuss specifically this Toronto attack? And I'm not going to lead this in any way. I just got back from teaching in Australia, so I'm insanely jet lagged. And I haven't even researched what's going on other than, what I saw in the news, what I heard. And so what do you know? What do you know? What you probably know other stuff that you probably don't want to talk about because of your things aren't released in the news. But
usually that statement is true, but actually not in this matter. I just landed in San Francisco, turned my phone on while I was on the plane, and then messages start pouring in. For everything from people in the profession saying, "Hey, did you hear about this? What's going on? Is it a terror attack? Mentally ill?" A lot of people trying to inquire if I know. Family, friends, obviously checking in if we're okay. And for me, it was impactful in the sense I actually grew up in that neighborhood for most of my life in Canada, right around Finch and Yonge, which is just a major intersection down the street. Ironically enough, one of my very first martial arts schools that I attended, Taekwondo and Hapkido school, was right at that intersection. So it's a pretty heartfelt situation for me. But at the same token, as much as I always acknowledge the tragedy behind all this, and my heart goes out to all the people affected by this, not just the immediate victims and their families, but anybody who is out there who had to witness this this tragedy. I'm looking at my news feed, and I got a lot of my colleagues that I'm seeing right there, at the scene, and it's horrible. The same token for me, I'm tired of hearing all these headlines and all this situation. It just kind of gets to a point that you're like, why the hell does this have to be? So I kind of blocked it out. I had to come here on a trip to deal with some other stuff, and I just wasn't even acknowledging the situation until hours later, the phone starts ringing off the hook, media requests, and our association, the Canadian Tactical Officers Association, I deal with all the media interviews for terrorism-related situations. And so our colleagues are calling me and saying, hey, can you handle this? We're getting so many requests and not enough of us to go around. And so I, picked up bits and pieces of what was going on. I really didn't have much of an interest in finding out specifically intimate details of who he was, why he did it. I kind of limited a lot of all my my media talking as well to just what happened and just the face value, what the protocols would be, strategies would be, what the officer appeared to have been doing, and what he would have been legally allowed to do and tactically should have done, and that's it. So I don't have that much more information to give beyond what everybody already knows. It's in the headlines, because I just don't want to even dive into that right now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people may or may not know that I'm, formerly from Canada, and I went to school at York University and hung around that area, as well. And you think about it, it's funny because your situational awareness and self-awareness is on a different level than most people, and that's why you're a protector, and that's why you're part of the warrior arts. I feel this similarly about me when I walk around. There's things that I notice that other people don't notice. It's evidenced in the the system and who we train as well. So what can we share with people without 2020 hindsight and armchair quarterbacking shit? Let's just talk about as consultants, as experts who and you never know how you're going to react on the ground, but the whole spear system, everything is about a stimulus gets introduced too quickly. We know that neuroscience says your reptilian brain is going to bypass your cognitive brain. So there's a bit of an irony, when all these all the talking head experts say, well, this is what you would do in this here. The reality is you can only start doing things at 2 points. One, in an extremely telegraphic attack, meaning you've got space and time, and shit starts to happen. You still, in that case, you hear screaming or breaks, or somebody jumps a curve, and in the same way, everyone is so head down looking at their fucking phones, right? Texting these days, that when you think about a time you bumped into a fire hydrant, or you stepped off the curb and lost your balance, or a car honked at you, there's still this refractory delay between stimulus response where you go, what the fuck just happened there? Let alone if there's a van, piling through people. So, what are your thoughts in terms of situational awareness and safety for this?
Well, that's an excellent topic, Tony, definitely, and you're definitely an expert on that that subject. And here's the thing, here's the irony, is that we've got neighborhoods, and probably every city that we know and that we live in, that just by virtue of reputation, if we suddenly wandered in those neighborhoods, it would be a matter of locking the car doors, making sure the windows are rolled up, and putting our heads on a swivel. Not even as professionals,
Right.
It's everyday civilian out there who sees the headlines of things that go on in these neighborhoods. And you get out of these neighborhoods, and it's life as usual, and head down to the cell phone and oblivious to everything around you. And the irony is that in this day and age, especially with the threat of terrorism, and just inherently where, acts of violence at the hands of the mentally ill take place, it's not in those neighborhoods where everybody's walking with their heads on a swivel. It's the random neighborhoods where people aren't expecting it. That's just the whole point. It's
Right.
the ability to victimize in masses. And, you're going to get that where you've got people that have their guards down and aren't paying attention and are standing in crowds and walking around and are accessible. And that's the biggest challenge that there is to keeping people safe against these threats these days, and also staying safe if we happen to be in these environments. So it always boils down to, as you very well know, it's a matter of life habits. It's not a matter of just saying that now we've got cars driving off the road onto sidewalks and ramming into people, so let me start to be aware for rented vehicles that are driving around recklessly. It's a matter of knowing that every step that we take when we're outside in the world, we face hazards, whether they're safety hazards, whether they're hazards at the hands of threats, and people have to adopt a new mentality that becomes part of their DNA of awareness to identify and avoid anything that will put us or give the threat an opportunity to access us.
It's interesting because what you said is 100% accurate. At the same time, you really didn't say anything, and I say that to you with love and friendship, because it's one of those, maybe because you just been peppered with all these media calls where they're asking for some either secret recipe, some panacea to this, or some dirt or whatever. But the reality is this is, you and I are both going to take our kids to Disneyland, at some point. We're going to go to SeaWorld. We're going to go to a movie and be in line buying tickets. And so the counterpoint, and I'm just being the contrarian on this call for people listening, because what Nir said to you, everybody, is like, hey, if you suddenly decided to go tour as a Canadian or as American Australia, and you were going to go out in the outback and you were going to go up to Darwin and look around, it would behoove you to understand a little bit about their snakes and their spiders there. And you couldn't just fall asleep anywhere you want or walk anywhere you want, because you would probably die, right? And if you weren't like in the the concrete jungle, but if you're actually out, and that's part of what he's talking about philosophically, is to understand that in certain areas your head has to be on a swivel. But specifically with this, man, you got millions of people in Toronto or New York City or LA or whatever, and they walk to work, or they get off public transit, or it's lunchtime and you're sitting there. And this isn't a discussion, guys, of the world's so dangerous and unfair. This isn't about Chicken Little and the sky's falling down, because the alternative to this is just never to go outside again, right? And stay in your house. So do we have any, what would you tell your family, buddy? Would you your immediate family that says, man, I'm scared shitless. Give me some tips. For for example, one of the things that we do in one of our drills called emotional climatization, ECT, emotional climate training, what we do is we isolate the auditory, visual, and tactile cues that trigger a flinch at extreme close quarters. And it's a really unique drill that I've kind of finessed over a couple of decades. And it changes by doing drills in slow motion. What it does is educates the RAS, the reticular activating system. And so you do drills with your eyes closed, you do them with your eyes open. And what we're actually doing is just training the brain to understand some of the nuances of violence, the pre-fight, the pre-contact part of violence. And for me, there's that happens in a vehicle assault as well. You're going to hear, the engine. You're going to hear brakes or gas. You're going to hear a car hit a sidewalk. You're going to hear screaming. Now, this doesn't change anything if you're like right on the X, right? Or like if you're right on the X and this happens, sorry, there's zero you can do right there. But other stuff.
Sure. So let's stick then to this particular attack and this particular modality of attack, because if we don't want to keep it generic, then we'll identify a modality so that we can see the different characteristics that tend to exist that are commonplace with this type of attack, and that will perhaps give us some specifics of what we might be able to do to mitigate it, right? And first and foremost, the problem that we have is that all these attacks are random. That's number one. So situational awareness, we understand. It's a matter of properly positioning yourself to be able to identify, perceive the problem as it's unfolding before it actually catches you on the X, as you said. Things like understanding to stay away from crowds. That is the one thing that a targeted attack is going to look for, is the crowds to maximize the casualty rate, which is what translates to that shock factor. So do not walk in crowds of people. It's an easy thing to do. Walk facing oncoming traffic, so that,
right.
Again, none of these are 100% guarantees, but they hopefully kind of go with the grain of common sense of what an attacker might be doing to try to blend in to the normalcy of the environment before they suddenly break away from that normalcy as they're enacting the attack, right? So walk against traffic so that you hopefully have more time to perceive a vehicle that suddenly mounts the sidewalk. When you're standing at the intersection across the street, don't stand at the intersection, right? The curb, the way most people do. Everybody is, in
a hurry to get across the street there, right?
There. And I tell you, I do this. I've done this my entire life. I'll even hit the little pedestrian cross button, and then I'll step back to the corner of the building and wait for the light to change. Not because of terrorism, because I've actually been hit by a car when I was a kid while riding a bike.
Okay.
And I have these little
change your relationship.
Little nuances. That's right. That I just don't want that to happen again. And cars accidentally mount sidewalks all the time, right? So go push the pedestrian button, stay away from the intersection, wait till the light changes. If there's a crowd of people, let them cross first. Give it a couple seconds. Don't be don't get sucked into the normalcy of the environment. If you do happen to have an ill-intended individual, mentally ill or terrorist in a vehicle, waiting for the light to change, so this crowd comes walking across the street, he'll probably hit the gas the second that first wave of crowd is right in front of his vehicle, right? So give it a couple seconds. Learn the pattern of what's going on around you. The perpetrators, the majority of the time, especially in terrorism, again, it's like I said, it'll be that chameleon effect, that they will camouflage into the environment to give a sense of normalcy so they can permeate as closely as they can to the identified target. And then at that last minute is where they suddenly uncloak themselves, and it's the polar opposite of what the environment is like. So study the crowds, study the people, what everybody is doing, how they're moving. Is it congruent to the context of the environment? Exact same thing with vehicles. That psychological application will be translated into the vehicle via the mindset of the driver who's behind the wheel and what their intents are. Those are some, I guess, some of the tangible tactical strategies and tips that I always try to impart on people. And at the end of the day, you just got to hope for the best.
Those are some good ones, and it, it's funny because while you were describing the button, standing and hitting the crosswalk button and stuff like that, for the longest time, I always will stand adjacent to a tree, the pole, and from the youngest age, I can't even explain why, I would always think, like, if somebody jumped a sidewalk and came in there, that pole or to that tree would stop them, and that would be my body armor. That would be my shield right there. Yeah. And I can't even, I was doing that when I was 10 for some reason. I just always looking for that barricade and that hard cover. And I like the idea of holding back, having that refractory delay of, let things go. And if you happen to be at the front of a line and you are in a hurry, don't be looking at your phone. Every victim of violence who lives to tell the tale, almost, in all of my studies, but our stuff is more, our studies is more the hand-to-hand, mano-a-mano, violent encounter. But they all said, 100% of them said, I had a bad feeling before the attack.
Absolutely.
And so if you're out there and you're just looking and just kind of reading the world, very often there are some telegraphs. There's something going on here. And this isn't again like a judgment on anybody that was immediately impacted, literally and figuratively. It's just like, just be aware.
100%. At the end of the day, there's one principle that will always be the deciding factor in any type of a situation, whether it's an accident, whether it's an encounter, and that is who's the lucky one in that day, in that moment. Everything else falls behind that. We could be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time and know everything to do, the right things to do, and we don't get a chance to apply anything because luck is not on our side on that moment, unfortunately, right? It's just the way that it goes.
This particular attack in specific, do you think this is being, like, it's very bizarre for somebody to go rent a vehicle and then carry out the murder with that vehicle? If you're truly mentally insane, and I'm not talking about philosophically, because we could say that terrorists are insane too, right? Like why would you want to go, kill a bunch of innocent people? That's insane. But if this is true Mental illness, like, are you suddenly lucid to go rent, and then, like, why not just steal a car? Or why not, it'd be like, one of my questions is, does he have his own car? Because it wouldn't surprise me in this day and age, especially some of the stuff in my former country with how they deal with the touchy-feely, from the snowflakey, gender fluidity, liberally, all the stuff. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask for comments, but that there's some stuff that people have just been told, do not publish that, do not say that, because it's just a like, mentally disturbed people don't go rent cars and then drive into people and then try to, did you see the video of him trying to get shot by the cop?
Oh yeah, 100%.
What did he have a gun in his hand, or was his phone? What was it?
It was a cell phone.
Okay.
I have no doubt that there's some elements there potentially of
copycat type thing.
Type of a thing. I do believe that this wasn't an act of deliberate terrorism. I do believe mentally ill, and that's the driving factor. The vehicle rental, which in practically every single one of these attacks, all these terrorist attacks, even their active shooting attacks, they go rent a car. So sure, that's a very suspicious. It's either a very suspicious incident, or there's actually some kind of a plausible reason as to why he was in a rental van. I mean, we don't know yet. I even don't know yet what the details are. But for me, it's really that encounter with the police constable that kind of solidifies my belief on what his motive was, and that he was mentally ill and was attempting to turn this into an incident of suicide by cop. That's my feeling and my thoughts on it.
Yeah, pretty insane. Well, I wanted to get on and just do like a quick one update, get people, thinking and sharing this, and just like a quick recap for anyone listening here. There's, I've been asked for decades now, hey, what's the counter to an ambush? And I would always say there is no counter to an ambush. There's only a counter to a failed ambush. And you've got, in a case like this, you almost, well, it's not a natural disaster. It's about that gap time. If suddenly there was an earthquake or a flood or like something that you just could not predict, how do you manage your fear? This all comes down to like, the kind of foundation of everything that I preach and teach is no strategy or tactic is going to be effective if you don't manage your fear. And so, don't, panic and go into denial about this. Just accept this shit is out there. And, this could be, there's been instances where, someone has a heart attack where they're driving, and they're like accidents where, someone gets, cut off or texting or whatever, and this shit happens. Clearly you don't get the intended impact like that this guy had, where he picked a crowded area. But what I'm saying for everybody is like, and you use the word random, because there's no pattern to this and frequency. You can't suddenly, okay, let's close this street. This happens every week on Friday here. We're going to close this street, or I'm not going to go to this street. And that's kind of what Nir's alluding to. But you got to kind of just look at this as, what would you do if, in any case here? So the strategy and psychology of that is this be your own bodyguard concept. Is you got to be able to protect yourself. You got to protect your family. You've got to have improved situational awareness. Situational awareness is intrinsically connected to self-awareness. So if you live in fear and doubt, or feel like you live in a bubble, that's going to change your situational awareness. And you need to study fear and the psychology of fear, because when shit starts to happen, it's the people that keep their shit together that start moving.
Absolutely.
There was one other thing that I know you've got, some skills or resources in here, but a lot of people in the self-defense martial arts DT world, and it's more and more it's changing, but everyone talks about like the tactical stuff. But the most important part of this, which is part two of any one of these scenarios, is your ability to administer first aid to yourself or somebody else. Any quick thoughts on tourniquet, tactical med, any?
100%. I mean, that's become part of, the whole first aid, emergency medical field treatments. I mean, that's just become part of, second nature to all tactical training out there now. It's just part of the whole package, where it never used to be. And, studies show, statistics show that when you've got people knowledgeable and capable at administering first aid, whether it's to themselves or to others, that is what keeps people alive. A lot more people alive, less victims. I mean, and it's common sense. Time is of the essence. When you're talking about a situation such as this attack that occurred here, especially also in any type of a terrorist attack, active shooter predicaments, people have to understand that there's a protocol that's in place here. When there's a potential threat in the scenario, it doesn't matter how many casualties there are and how badly people are hurt and how quickly they need first aid. Medical services are not allowed to enter the scene until the police can render that scene safe and give them direction to do so. You can be in a predicament where you've got police officers that'll just walk right by you as you're sitting there bleeding out from a gunshot wound, because their protocol, if it's an active shooter type of situation, is to first of all neutralize the threat. I'm looking at a lot of communications with my work colleagues that were among the first on scene there, and they're just running from victim to victim, checking, trying to prioritize who needs right. Medical assistance first. And you can have somebody who is in a detrimental disposition, requires really quick medical assistance, but the body laying next to him requires a lot more or quicker medical assistance. And so, that person will be bypassed to go on to the person who requires it first and foremost. So just like, you can't rely on calling 911 and waiting for the police to show up when you've got a person standing there holding a knife to you saying, give me your wallet or I'm going to kill right. you. You have to have the skills and the resources to, in this day and age, ensure your own survival first and foremost. So it's absolutely crucial. And the byproduct, of all of this is if you go and take up emergency, medical training, in case you're caught up in some kind of a disaster or tragic situation, you know that you're also equipped with skills to deal with the everyday stuff that you're more likely to encounter. You know,
Right.
someone home getting hurt or having a heart attack or who knows what. Right.
Right.
So absolutely life-saving skills. It's valuable, and everybody should, add that to the repertoire of education skills that they take on in life.
Nice. Dude, if you want to learn more about because you also do, of course, you teach courses, self-defense and other stuff around seminar, stuff like that. If you want to learn more about you, where's the best place to look you up?
Website, my website works, www.ct707.com, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google. I'm a little bit everywhere.
Right. I'll post some links in the show notes stuff. Okay, man. Hey, great. Thank you for squeezing us in. I know you're busy, and we will stay in touch and do another show, not after some sort of tragedy.
Looking forward to that, brother. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Be safe, Nir.
You too.